Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of Stonehenge Builders DNA, ancient genetics revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. For generations, the question of who built Stonehenge was answered with varying degrees of confidence and varying degrees of accuracy. The Druids know Stonehenge predates the Celtic-speaking peoples who practiced Druidism by at least 1,000 years. Merlin, that's legend. A lost race of giants. No, the actual builders of Stonehenge, identified archaeologically for over a century as Neolithic farmers who arrived in Britain around 4000 BCE, were known to archaeology in terms of their material culture, their pottery, their burial practices, their agricultural economy, but not in terms of their biology, their appearance, or their genetic relationships to other populations of the period. And then, in 2019, a landmark paper in Nature Ecology and Evolution published the results of ancient DNA analysis from 67 Neolithic individuals, including individuals directly associated with the Stonehenge monument, and told a story that transformed understanding of who the builders were and what happened to them. The story the DNA told was extraordinary. The people who built Stonehenge, who were also responsible for the megalithic monument tradition, stone circles, long barrows, causewayed enclosures, that marks the British Neolithic, were not the indigenous hunter-gatherers of Mesolithic Britain. They were recent immigrants, farmers from the western Mediterranean coast of Europe, most closely related to Neolithic Anatolian farmers and to contemporary Neolithic populations of Iberia and coastal Europe. They arrived in Britain around 4000 BCE, bringing their crops, their cattle, their pottery, and their tradition of monumental megalithic construction. And then around 500 BCE, just as Stonehenge was being completed in its final form, with the large sarsen stones erected and the bluestones arranged, the archaeological and genetic record shows something sudden and dramatic. The Neolithic farmers who had built Stonehenge were almost completely replaced within a few centuries by new arrivals from the steppe grasslands of what is now Ukraine and Russia. These newcomers, the Beaker people, known for their distinctive bell-shaped pottery, carried different genes, different culture, and ultimately different languages, Proto-Celtic and other early Indo-European tongues. By 2000 BCE, approximately 90% of the genetic ancestry of the British population had changed. The people who built Stonehenge had been replaced, not necessarily by violence, but by the demographic dominance of the new arrivals. Stonehenge stood, and its builders were gone. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The sky was the original clock, calendar, and map. Before writing, before money, before cities, human beings looked up and organized their lives around what they saw. The position of the sun at solstice told them when to plant, and when to harvest. The rising of specific stars marked the seasons. The phases of the moon governed ceremonial calendars in cultures from Ireland to India. Our ancestors were not casual observers of the night sky. They were meticulous, obsessive, and precise in a way that rivals modern astronomical science. This precision is encoded in stone at sites around the world. Newgrange in Ireland is aligned so precisely that sunlight enters its inner chamber only during the 5 days around the winter solstice, and it has done so every year for more than 5,000 years. The pyramids of Giza are oriented to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Stonehenge tracks both the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset, as well as the 18-6-year lunar cycle. These alignments are not accidental. They were engineered with mathematical precision by cultures we have long underestimated. What drove this obsession with celestial mechanics? Partly practical. Agriculture depends on knowing the seasons, but partly something more profound. Ancient cultures believed the sky was alive, that the movements of stars and planets determined the fates of kingdoms and harvests. In this worldview, encoding celestial cycles into permanent stone was not merely useful but sacred. The great monuments of the ancient world are, among other things, the most durable clocks ever built. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Stonehenge Builders DNA, ancient genetics revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The 2019 Nature Ecology and Evolution study by David Reich, Mark Thomas, and colleagues analyzed the ancient genomes of 67 Neolithic individuals from Britain and continental Europe, providing the most comprehensive DNA picture of the people who built and used Stonehenge and related monuments. Key findings: the Neolithic farmers who arrived in Britain around 4000 BCE were most closely related to Neolithic populations from Iberia and coastal Western Europe, consistent with maritime migration along the Atlantic coast. They had limited genetic overlap with the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who inhabited Britain before their arrival, and they showed high genetic similarity to each other, consistent with a all founding population that colonized Britain rapidly. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Neolithic farmers responsible for the megalithic tradition in Britain had a distinctive physical profile derived from their Anatolian Neolithic ancestry. They were shorter than the later Bronze Age people who replaced them, had darker skin, darker hair, and probably darker eyes than modern British populations, who are largely descended from the later steppe ancestry Bronze Age immigrants. Their diet was predominantly agricultural: wheat, barley, and domesticated cattle. Their ritual practices centered on collective burial in communal tomb monuments, long barrows. Ancestors were kept in accessible chambers and periodically consulted or rearranged. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine The beaker phenomenon, named for the distinctive bell-shaped pottery type, represented a major demographic and cultural replacement in Britain between approximately 2500 and 2000 BCE. Ancient DNA from beaker period burials in Britain shows the arrival of a population with high proportions of steppe ancestry related to the Yamnaya culture of the Pontic steppes. This steppe ancestry is associated with the spread of Proto-Indo-European languages across Europe. By approximately 2000 BCE, steppe ancestry individuals and their descendants constituted approximately 90% of the British gene pool, with the original Neolithic farmer ancestry contributing less than 10%. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the transition from Neolithic to beaker culture at Stonehenge itself is archaeologically complex. The monument went through multiple phases of construction, with the final major phase, the erection of the large Sarsen trilithons, dated to approximately 2500–200 BCE, which overlaps with the beginning of the population replacement. Who specifically supervised the final construction phase of Stonehenge? Neolithic farmers, early beaker people, or a mixed population, is not resolved by the DNA evidence alone. The DNA evidence establishes what happened to the population at the broadest scale, not the specific composition of the workforce that moved the Sarsen stones. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the bluestones at Stonehenge. The smaller stones that form the inner horseshoe and circle are geologically identified as coming from the Preseli Hills in Wales, approximately 280 kilometers away from Stonehenge. Their transport from Wales to Wiltshire, whether by land or sea or combination, required either organized mass labor or a sustained transport tradition over multiple generations. Geological analysis, published in 2019, identified specific outcrops in the Preseli Hills that were the source of specific bluestone types at Stonehenge. And some of the identified outcrops show evidence of prior megalithic monument construction, suggesting the bluestones may have been transported from a pre-existing well. SH monument and re-erected at Stonehenge. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the Sarsen stones at Stonehenge, the large grey sandstone trilithons, come from a source approximately 25 kilometers away in the Marlborough Downs area of Wiltshire. A 2020 study using geochemical fingerprinting and core samples from the stones identified West Woods near Marlborough as the specific source quarry. The Sarsen stones, which weigh up to 25 tons each, were transported from the Marlborough Downs to Stonehenge using a combination of wooden sledges and possibly rollers. The specific technology is debated, but there is no evidence of water transport, unlike the bluestones. The Sarsen route has no navigable waterways. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Stonehenge Builders DNA. Ancient genetics revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument. This is where the debate becomes most intense. because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Atlantic maritime migration theory, supported by the 2019 DNA study, holds that the Neolithic farmers who built Stonehenge arrived in Britain as part of a broad Atlantic maritime migration from southwestern Europe, most closely related to contemporary Neolithic populations of Iberia and France, rather than to the mainland European Neolithic populations that had colonized Central Europe earlier. This maritime route of colonization along the Atlantic coast of Europe brought with it the specific megalithic cultural tradition, stone circle building, long barrow construction, that distinguishes the Atlantic Neolithic from the linear pottery Neolithic of Central Europe. Stonehenge is thus the culmination of an architectural tradition that developed along the Atlantic seaboard. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the rapid replacement theory, supported by the DNA evidence, holds that the beaker replacement of the Neolithic farmers in Britain was rapid, occurring within a few centuries rather than over a millennium, and was driven by demographic factors, high fertility advantage of the steppe ancestry beaker people, possibly related to domesticated horse use and a more mobile pastoral economy rather than primer. Wily by warfare. The mechanism of replacement is debated. Some researchers emphasize disease. The incoming population may have had immunological advantages. Some emphasize economic advantage, and some allow for varying degrees of violence in different regions. The DNA evidence itself does not directly distinguish between these mechanisms. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the cultural continuity despite demographic replacement theory, proposed by some archaeologists who are skeptical of excessive emphasis on genetics, holds that the replacement of the Neolithic farmers' genes does not mean the replacement of all Neolithic cultural knowledge and practices. The beaker people who arrived in Britain may have adopted elements of Neolithic ritual practice, including the use and maintenance of existing stone monuments, as part of their cultural integration with the landscape they were settling. Under this model, Stonehenge may have continued to function as a ritual site under beaker period management even as the genetic population changed, representing a cultural continuity that transcends the demographic turnover. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Stonehenge Builders DNA, ancient genetics revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the ancient DNA from 67 Neolithic individuals published in the 2019 Nature study is the primary genetic evidence. The systematic genome-wide analysis of this sample provides a statistically robust characterization of the Neolithic farmer population's genetic structure, their relationships to continental European populations, and the degree and timing of the beaker replacement. The geographic and temporal coverage of the sample, individuals from across Britain from different time periods, allows the replacement process to be traced through time rather than being a snapshot. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented isotope analysis of skeletal remains from Stonehenge-associated burials has revealed information about the origins of individuals buried near the monument. Strontium isotope ratios in teeth, which form during childhood and reflect local geology, show that some individuals buried in the Stonehenge environs grew up in Wales or other non-Wiltshire regions, suggesting that Stonehenge was a pilgrimage or gathering site that rail people from across Britain. Lead isotope analysis of specific individuals shows geographic origins as far as the Alps, suggesting international connections for some members of the Stonehenge-using community. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed archaeological evidence for the cultural practices of the Neolithic builders, the long barrow monuments that precede Stonehenge, the animal bone assemblages from the nearby site of Durrington Walls, which served as a feasting site for the builders. The depositional patterns of objects at Stonehenge itself provides the material cultural context for interpreting the DNA evidence. The combination of genetic evidence and material cultural evidence paints a picture of a specific, identifiable people with distinctive beliefs and practices who built Britain's greatest monument. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Stonehenge Builders DNA, ancient genetics, revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The 2019 DNA study was widely covered internationally and has been integrated into the public interpretation at Stonehenge, where the English heritage visitor experience now incorporates information about the genetic origins of the builders. The study's implications for the history of Britain, that the people who built the most famous monument in Britain left almost no genetic trace in the modern British population, have generated both academic discussion and popular fascination. Ongoing archaeological research at and around Stonehenge continues to refine understanding of the monument's construction sequence and use. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscape Project, a multi-year geophysical survey, has revealed previously unknown features, including a ring of massive shafts surrounding the Durrington Walls ceremonial complex, announced in 2020, and multiple previously unidentified monuments. The application of ancient DNA analysis to skeletal material from all phases of Stonehenge area occupation, combined with the results of these landscape surveys, is building a comprehensive picture of who used this landscape and how over the roughly 3,000 years of monumental construction. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Stonehenge Builders DNA. Ancient genetics revealed who really built Britain's greatest monument, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Stonehenge ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in his documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.